And welcome into the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski and Jim Leitner, and the Fighting Saints once again 2-0 on the weekend. Mid-November is when they saw a little bit of a slump. They lost 2 games in a row at home, and since then they've rattled off 4 straight. And Friday night, and we'll get into it a little bit more in a second, but the most impressive victory of the season for not just the Fighting Saints, but maybe any team in the USHL, considering who they were playing and where it was being played. 7-1 over Waterloo. And then Saturday, tough-fought overtime victory against Des Moines, 3-2. And before we break down each game individually, it's just another weekend where the Fighting Saints are winning in different ways, but the big key is continuing to win. They've won 4 straight. They're 12-2-1 on the season. It's the second best start through the first 15 games in team history. And so the Fighting Saints really don't have much to complain about heading into a season where you have to be thankful for a lot of things. They can be thankful for just about everything.
Yeah, not at all. You mentioned their slump, and that was a 2-game losing streak. I'll take a 2-game losing streak as a slump all day long, all season long, and but that's it really speaks to the way this team has come together very quickly. A lot of great chemistry. They're finding ways to win, as you mentioned, a lot of different ways to win. And, this was a difficult challenge this weekend because you go from playing on the large sheet in Waterloo on Friday night to one of the smallest rinks in the USHL in Des Moines the following night, and you win both nights. So very impressive weekend by the Fighting Saints, and they maintain the best winning percentage in the USHL.
Yeah, they're still behind Chicago because Chicago won both games against Madison, taking care of business, scored 18 total goals in that series. They're 4 points behind Chicago, but with 3 games in hand, and you mentioned that winning percentage right now is still the best in the USHL. They went up against the second best team in the league in terms of points on Friday night, and it looked like a complete mismatch, and I don't think anyone going into that game would have expected that to play out the way it did, especially after seeing these two teams play a clean, crisp, tight-fought game here in Dubuque. But the Fighting Saints came out, and early in the first period, Waterloo controlled the play for about the first 3.5 minutes. Then they take a penalty. Dubuque gets 6 shots on that power play, no goals. And then the floodgates just opened up. Copperwood scored twice in the first period. They outshot Waterloo 20-6. And after Waterloo took that penalty, it was the Saints game the final 57 minutes.
Yeah, and you know what? It's kind of funny. I was watching that game, and, the first period, you mentioned the Saints outshot them 20-6. And I started thinking, man, here we go again. The Saints are going to dominate the first period, and they'll dominate the first 2 periods, and Waterloo will find a way in the third period, which is exactly what happened here a couple weeks ago at Mystique. Dubuque dominated those first 2 periods, should have won that game, and Waterloo found a way. So I'm thinking, man, this is going to happen again. Waterloo's got Dubuque's number, and to the Fighting Saints' credit, they scored 2 goals late in the first period, and then they just took off from there. And credit to them for keeping the foot on the gas and charging forward instead of letting Waterloo creep back into this game. It was a very thorough, very dominant performance, and it proved my initial thoughts very wrong.
Yeah, as complete of a 60 minutes as we've seen the Fighting Saints play this season, and the power play again scores a timely goal. It's not in the third period or overtime, but it comes in the second period when Dubuque is up 2-0, 5 minutes in, and Venuto scores a power play goal. I thought that was the biggest goal of the game, just because if Waterloo gets one early in that second period, 2-1 after a dominant first period, it almost erases everything you did in the first 20, 3-0 early on in the second, and that's when Dubuque really, I think, felt the confidence that they could just take off with the game.
Yeah, that was a big goal, and too, I thought when Waterloo scored to make it 4-1 in the third period, again, you start thinking, this is Waterloo, it's their home ice. This is a team that plays really well on its home ice. It's 4-1, and before you know it, it's 6-1, it's 7-1, and credit to the Fighting Saints. They answered really well. They responded really well to giving up that 1 goal in the third period. So, I think, again, there were a lot of big goals and a lot of, in terms of gaining separation on Waterloo, because, as we've seen, nobody gets separation on Waterloo at Young Arena, and it never happens.
Yeah, you mentioned it's never happened before, Waterloo losing by 6 goals at Young Arena in the Tier 1 history. They had lost by 5 goals a handful of times, but even that doesn't happen much. In the Tier 1 history, which is now 17, this is the 18th season in Tier 1 for the USHL, Waterloo has never had a losing record on home ice. 18 years. I mean, I can't count this year yet, but as good as they are, and they're 6-1 to start the season, I would assume if I was a betting man, I would bet that they would not finish with a losing record this season. But only once they finished at 500. Every other season has been a winning record at home. So it's not just recent success at home. It's close to 2 decades of success at home. They've never seen a loss like this. And the Fighting Saints, speaking of long droughts, they had gone about a year and a half without a hat trick. Matthew Copperwood changed that on Friday.
Yeah, and it's 7-1 win. Geez, that should never happen. That you lose by 6 goals, but you get into a game and you're down by a couple goals. You start pinching, you start taking chances to try to score, and that leads to goals the other way. So it is surprising that Waterloo has not lost by 6 goals until that game. I mean, you would think that you play 30 games at home every year times 18 years. You would think at one point they'd give up, a 6-goal game. But again, credit to the Fighting Saints and Copperwood too. He was the hot hand. That line was really working well, and it's pretty cool to see. And that's another thing. It was kind of amazing that it's been more than a year and a half since they'd had a hat trick. And but again, he had the hot hand, and almost everybody had a hot hand. Really. You had so many guys with points that night.
11 players with points that night.
Yeah, by far the most this season. 11 players with points, and but again, I think it was just a matter they were clicking on all cylinders, and I don't think Waterloo was playing terribly. I think it was just a matter of the Fighting Saints were playing that much better.
Yeah, Dubuque's a fast team. They're faster than last year, and it showed on that big ice surface in this game. And the carryover effect was apparent in the first period against Des Moines. They came out like gangbusters and scored 2 goals in that first period. Looked like they were ready to run away with another game. But then as we saw the first time against the Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers have been one of the worst first period teams in the USHL this season. It's a big reason why they haven't won more games, because they're clawing back just to force it to overtime instead of having a decent first period and then being able to take over in the second and third. But Dubuque was the better team for the first 20. Des Moines was the better team for the next 40, and the Fighting Saints kind of had to hang on and kill off 3 penalties in the final 10 minutes to even get that game to overtime. It mirrored the first game against Des Moines a lot. It was just lower scoring. But then again, the power play, 6th time of the night, it took 4-on-3 in overtime. And where Copperwood played hero on Friday night, it was Cherameta on Saturday night, speaking to the depth and just anyone being able to step up at any single time. But certainly much closer on Saturday than it was Friday.
Yeah, and I really thought that game turned late in the second period. Dubuque, I believe it was 2-1 or 2-0 or 2-1, and the Fighting Saints had a couple abbreviated 5-on-3 power plays. I think Des Moines took 3 or 4 penalties in a span of 2 minutes or a little more than 2 minutes, and so the Fighting Saints had a couple 5-on-3s and they couldn't cash.
Yep.
And I thought Des Moines really seized the momentum from that. It was a great penalty kill by them, against the number 1 power play in the USHL in Dubuque. So that was key for them, and then they come out and score in the first minute of the third period to tie it up. So that's really where the game, I thought, turned. And you're right, I thought Des Moines was the better team, for at least the better half of the last half of that game.
And the Fighting Saints, again, doing enough on the power play, but 0 for 5 before they got to overtime. I don't think it's concerning because of how good the power play's been, but that you have to give Des Moines a lot of credit because that's not something that usually happens. And the one thing that maybe was a little bit concerning on the power play, and we touched on this before we got on air, was the 5-on-3 really didn't look good. And that seems to often happen, I think, to teams at every level on the 5-on-3, when they're trying to be so deliberate and make that perfect pass because of all the open ice. Their power play actually looks a lot worse than when the team has an extra penalty killer.
Yeah, and two, the one thing that you see a lot of teams do when they're on 5-on-3, they kind of pack it in a little tighter instead of working around the perimeter a lot more. They only have 3 defenders to go against you, so you can kind of pinch in a little bit closer. But that takes away a little bit of time and space, and so it is kind of difficult to get some good quality scoring chances. I talked to Cherameta after the game, and he made it sound like he didn't feel like the power play was that bad when they went 0 for 5, but they just weren't scoring. So, and then they score in overtime, and you think the power play looks great.
Yep.
But I think it was it was big to get that power play goal, especially after struggling, going 0 for 5 during regulation time, and what a beautiful one-timer by Cherameta to win it and send the Fighting Saints home happy.
Yeah, it was a big game for Cherameta because he had really struggled offensively the previous 3 or even 4 weeks, snapped a 6-game goalless drought with 2 goals in that game. And you could see, I think, him trying to maybe press a little bit in the last couple games. So to get that first goal was big, but that second goal, he's been trying to score that goal so much this season where he sets up in that right dot, kind of towards the bottom of the dot, and you called it just a perfect shot over the blocker side of row. A big game that maybe might catapult him to some good things before the holiday break.
Yeah, I think when he committed to Ohio State a couple weeks ago, that was a huge weight off his shoulders. And sometimes you see a guy take a little bit of a dip after that happens, and it's just a matter of getting a good bounce and getting back on track. And I thought he's been playing pretty well and just not being rewarded for it. So, hopefully that 2-goal game will really get him back on track and back to his scoring ways. At the beginning of the year, he was on fire, and he's among the top scorers in the USHL. But now hopefully this is a game that will get him back on track.
Now, before we take our first break, those were 2 big goals for Cherameta in the game, but 2 other big goals scored for the Fighting Saints this weekend. On Friday, it was Luke Robinson. That was the 4th of the game, his first in the USHL. And then on Saturday, it was Robert Cronin, the first of the game, and his first in the USHL. Always great to see guys get their first in the league. And, it was awesome to see Cronin get his first, but really Luke Robinson, he was around for 20-plus games last year. He scored 1 in the preseason, and he's had such a good defensive season. To be rewarded in the Fighting Saints' best offensive performance of the season was pretty fitting.
Yeah, Robinson is he's such a mature leader, and when I talk to him, he kind of reminds me a lot of former Fighting Saints coach Jason Lammers, just the way he carries himself, the way he talks, and Jason Lammers is a grown man, but Luke Robinson, he carries himself like a 30-year-old, and he's one of the big leaders on this team, and I think a big reason why the Fighting Saints are having the year that they're having so far, the way they're developing chemistry, the way everything's going. So it's great to see him rewarded, and we've talked about it for the last couple months. As soon as the Fighting Saints secondary scoring starts to pick up, I think this team is really going to take off. And, like you said, Robinson got his first goal, Cronin got his first goal. Got a couple other guys out there who are starting to pick up assists and, really starting to pad that score sheet. I think 14 different guys had points this weekend. Mm-hmm. So I think once these guys start getting a little more confidence and that secondary scoring really picks up, this is going to be a tough team to beat.
Yeah, they already are a tough team. That's the
They're
thing.
They're a tougher team to beat.
That's the thing, that the defense has been so good all season long that even when the scoring hasn't been there consistently, they've been able to win games. And this was probably the best back-to-back performances that we've seen from Stephen Halliday as well. He's starting to start going a little bit more, seems to be building some more confidence. But, when you look at the beginning of the season and all the success they've had, and then say you can add a guy like Cronin who had 5 points in the preseason and just got his first of the regular season. You can add Halliday, who we know can be a lot better than he's been. Jimmy Glynn has been on the secondary scoring, but he's starting to jump up. Mm-hmm. Antonio Venuto still, I think, has another level. So many players. Ryan Beck, he was out of Saturday's game. He had a good game on Friday with 2 points, and I think Beck, once he starts to learn this league, is going to take the next step. So much talent, but he's still very young. There's so many players that they can still draw offense from that they really haven't gotten a ton from this year yet.
Yeah, Reggie Millet's another one.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who's been such a big impact player defensively as a forward and on the penalty kill, and he's doing a good job getting to the net front. I think it's just going to be a matter of time before he pops his first one. And yeah, there's a lot of guys who, when they start popping a couple goals, I think that the Saints are really going to take off, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, 12-2-1. It's been fun to watch so far. A very busy weekend upcoming for the Fighting Saints, and that's what we'll get into next. 3 games in 4 days and a lot of travel in between for Dubuque. It's not an easy road and not an easy way to end November, so we'll break down all 3 games on the other side. Welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski, Jim Leitner, getting you set for the final weekend of games here in November, and the final week of games, really, because it starts on Wednesday for the Fighting Saints. They'll be in a very familiar place, Buccaneer Arena, for the third time this season. Des Moines and Dubuque play 8 times in total, and they've started off with 3 straight, as Des Moines being the home team. Then a travel day on Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Thursday is off for Thanksgiving. Friday in Fargo. Saturday in Sioux Falls. A busy weekend for the Fighting Saints. A lot of travel in that weekend. And this is going to be a big test for the Fighting Saints. Not necessarily because they're playing the top teams in the league, but because of how much they're going to be on a bus this weekend. From Des Moines to Fargo, it's 7 hours. From Fargo to Sioux Falls, it's 4. From Sioux Falls back, obviously you don't worry about playing another game after that, but it's still another 5 hours. And to Des Moines, it's 3 hours. So all told, the Fighting Saints are going to be spending close to 20 hours on a bus this weekend. It starts off with probably the toughest team of the 3 in terms of the record in Des Moines, and just because also they played them so recently, there's that familiarity. It always gets tougher when you play a team more and more. But then Fargo's beaten Dubuque, and they are never a slouch. They play physical, they play low scoring. Sioux Falls, the record says it's an easy game, but when it's the third game in 4 days after a lot of travel, it's not going to be easy to play for the Fighting Saints. So this will be a really good test because of the amount of time they're going to have to spend on a bus and the amount of time they're going to have to focus on rest and recovery.
Yeah, and I think when I asked Luke Robinson about the challenge of this last weekend, playing in Waterloo and then playing in Des Moines, and to me that sounded like a real tough challenge. And he said, we don't think of them that way. We don't think of things as real tough challenges because we know we have the guys in the locker room who can handle it. We have all the pieces in place to survive those kind of challenges, and we don't think of them as big challenges. So I think first and foremost, that's the best mindset to have. Me and you, we look at it from the outside and we say, man, our old bodies, how are we going to recover from all that travel and playing 3 games in 4 days? But these guys don't really seem to matter. It doesn't seem to matter to them, and they embrace the challenge, and that's first and foremost, that's the best mindset to have. But take a step back and look at it from our perspective. Yeah, I think it's a real tough challenge. Playing, I think, well, Des Moines is the number 2 team in the Western Conference. I think Fargo is a better team than Des Moines. So I think you're playing 2 of the top 3 teams in the West, obviously, and Sioux Falls is the defending Clark Cup champion. And even though the record isn't as good as it probably could be, they're going to be tough at home, playing in front of that big crowd and playing with some pride. And they picked up a win this weekend in Youngstown, so I think they're going to be tougher than that record indicates.
Yeah, and you and I know, and the coaching staff, the team knows as well, there's not an easy win in this league, no matter what. When you look at the games against Des Moines and Fargo, 2 teams that Dubuque have played already, right now the expectation seems to be a 1-goal game with Des Moines because both have been 1-goal games. Both have gone past 60 minutes. And Fargo was a 1-goal game as well, where the Fighting Saints outplayed the Force, but not by a ton. Even though the shots were 30-17, it felt like Fargo was able to keep them to the perimeter, and that's kind of their game plan. Is they don't have a ton of scoring, but they can play physical and they can keep you to the outside. So at the first 2 games of that series, I don't really know what to expect with Sioux Falls because of how different a team they are from last year. But the first 2 games really seem like they're going to lend themselves to a tight game. Maybe Fargo low scoring, Des Moines with their offense could be a little higher scoring, but I don't expect it to be more than 1 or 2 goal differential at the end of either game.
No, and I think the one thing that I kind of look at is, Dubuque got beat by Waterloo a few weekends ago, and they came back and they thrashed them 7-1. Hopefully this is kind of a similar situation, that the Saints, they played Fargo. It was there was a game after they lost their first regulation loss of the season. So I think they were a little bit, I don't know if they were doubting themselves a little bit that night. But I think the familiarity of playing Fargo is going to help the Fighting Saints a lot in this second game this weekend. It made a big difference in Waterloo. They knew exactly what to expect from their personnel, and they went out and they played really good hockey and put up 7 goals. I don't expect them to score 7 goals in Fargo, as Fargo's a very tight defensive team, but I do think this is going to be a good opportunity for the Fighting Saints to show how much they've improved and how much they can adapt to an opponent that they already know. So I think that's going to be it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, it's a weekend that, realistically, Dubuque's been sweeping almost every single weekend this year. Realistically, this is a tough one to say that they will sweep, again, just because of the travel and playing 3 teams. This team has proven that they can probably win these 3 games, but I would say 2-1's a great record if you go on the road with all this travel against the teams you're playing. Then when you move forward to December, 2 against Muskegon, 2 against Green Bay. The Muskegon is both here at Mystique Community Ice Center. Green Bay is a home and home. But it'll be nice for the Fighting Saints after all that travel here to end the month that they're back for 3 out of 4 at home before they leave for the holiday break. And Muskegon they saw once, but it's not the same. It's almost like a new Muskegon team since they played in the very first game of the season. And then they haven't seen Green Bay yet, so it'll be nice to essentially see 2 new opponents to end this season, and really nice to see some Eastern Conference opponents because it's felt like Dubuque has been back in the Western Conference the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah, to that point, Dubuque has kind of struggled with the Western Conference in recent seasons. So to have this kind of record with a really top-heavy schedule, or a loaded schedule in terms of Western Conference teams, that's a good sign. Mm-hmm. And my opinion, just looking so far, I do think the Western Conference is a better conference again this year, as they have been. I think some of the more elite teams are out there, with the exception of Dubuque, Chicago. But I think from top to bottom, I think the West is tougher. So to have that kind of record is really important. But it is going to be nice to see some teams from the East for a change. And that Muskegon series is going to be interesting. They've kind of hit a little bit of a snag this weekend in Omaha. So it's going to be interesting to see them. And in Green Bay, haven't seen them since the preseason. And, you really can't gain a whole lot from seeing a team in the preseason because they change so much. So it's going to be exciting. And then we get Christmas.
Yeah. Long break for Christmas. The Fighting Saints will be off for basically 2 weeks, about a week and a half before they have to be back in Dubuque, and then they'll play 3 games in a row right on the other side of the Christmas break. There's 7 games between now and that Christmas break. Again, 3 this weekend, 2 against Muskegon the 6th and 7th, 2 against Green Bay the 13th and 14th. Realistically, after that 7-game stretch, what do you see in the Fighting Saints record as with those games?
Oh, boy. In those 7 games, this is always, every coach will tell you, this is always the toughest stretch of the season because you're at that point where it's been a long year already. For guys who have played midgets, a lot of times they only play 30, 40 games a season, and, you're already almost halfway there. But this is always the toughest stretch because it's between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and guys are starting to think about what they're going to do. They're going to what buddies they're going to see when they get back home for Christmas and all that. So it's always tough. But I think, realistically, I think they can win 5 out of the 7. Mm-hmm. And I think if you win 5 out of the 7, that puts you in a real nice spot going into the Christmas break. You're right there at the top of the standings in the Eastern Conference, and it sets you up really well for the second half. Now, the key is when you go home for Christmas, make sure you skate and stay in condition so you don't come back with too much excess Christmas goodies in your system. But I think if they win 5 out of the 7, I think they'll position themselves really well and build up some a margin for error in the second half.
Yeah, I like that mark too. It's kind of just based on where they've been playing so far this season. 5 wins seems very doable in this 7-game stretch, not discounting that there are going to be tough games, but more so the Fighting Saints have proven that they can play a good style of hockey against anyone. But 2 losses, it's more just a byproduct of eventually teams are going to be able to game plan and figure you out in this league, and it's not like the talent level takes a huge drop off from the number 1 teams to even the bottom of the standings. So I expect it to be very tough. I think 2-1 this weekend, and I haven't decided if they're going to split with Green Bay or Muskegon yet, but one of those weekends going to be a sweep to end December on a good note. And look, if what we're predicting comes true and they're 17-4-1 going into the break, I don't think anyone's going to be disappointed with that.
No, not at all. And I think the tough series, the tougher weekends, I think, are when you have those back-to-backs against the same team. because the coaching is so good in this league that coaches make good adjustments overnight. And, they can throw an entirely different game plan at you, and it's tough to adjust to that. So those, I think, are going to be tough. Muskegon that's going to be a tough series. Green Bay is going to be a tough series just because you're playing back-to-back. And like I said, teams are really good at game planning, and players are good at figuring out what the opponent does and understanding how to counter that. So, I think five wins. I'm not saying 2 regulation losses either,
right.
Jack. So I'm, it might be 5-1-1 maybe. So
well, we're almost guaranteed to go to overtime on Wednesday the way they played Des Moines this season.
The way it's gone with Des Moines, for sure, you're almost guaranteed that's going to happen. But it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, Des Moines on Wednesday, 6:35 puck drop. Fargo on Friday, 7 o'clock puck drop. And Sioux Falls on Saturday, 7 o'clock puck drop as well. A very busy week and weekend to end the November slate here in 2019-2020. Fighting Saints again, 12-2-1 right now, looking to continue to roll on this Midwest road trip as they head even further west into the Western Conference. We'll take another break. When we come back, we'll look at the Western Conference as well as the rest of the USHL in what was once again a busy weekend here for USHL hockey. Back in a moment. And welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski and Jim Leitner here with you on Monday before the Fighting Saints hit the road on Wednesday. And now we'll look at the rest of the USHL and how they fared this weekend. And a couple teams with series sweeps, actually 3 teams with series sweeps against the very same team. Those teams being the U17s, 2 overtime victories against Sioux City at home on Friday night. It was a 4-3 victory, and on Saturday night, a 6-5 victory in overtime. The Omaha Lancers with a pretty impressive sweep and a good bounce back after getting swept by Waterloo. They beat Muskegon 4-1 and 5-2 in Ralston, Nebraska. And then Chicago flexed its offensive muscles once again, taking advantage of playing the Madison Capitals twice. They win 11-5 on Friday and 7-4 on Saturday, in a Saturday game that saw Madison blow another third period lead. The Capitals are getting outscored by over 30 goals in the third period this year. It's never a recipe for success. They gave up 4 third period goals, didn't score a single one against Chicago on Saturday, but with those 3 sweeps, the Chicago one you kind of expected the way they've been playing. Omaha, though, I think that's a big moment for this Lancers team because they were 5-7-3 coming into the weekend, and I really didn't think they were as bad as 5-7-3. They lost a lot of tight games. I still think Omaha's top 3 in the Western Conference at the end of the year. This was a big step in the right direction for them.
No doubt about it, and Muskegon had been playing pretty well. So I think to go out there and sweep Muskegon, I think that's pretty impressive. And Muskegon's a team that that's a team that I can't figure out right now. That was a team that just ran away from the league in the first half last year, and this year they're right around the 500 mark. They're second to last in the Eastern Conference, and just haven't been able to figure it out. But if you're Omaha, you see a team like that, maybe the wounded animal effect. You get a team like that, you want to pounce on them, and they did, and good to them, good for them for getting 2 good quality wins on them. I'm not sure what the Friday night game looked like. I did get a chance to watch a little of the Saturday game, and they really ran away from them in the third period and made that an emphatic win. So it was very impressive from Omaha, and you might be onto something about them being one of the top teams in the West. I definitely see them, and they're definitely a playoff team, but I think they could have home ice advantage in the first round.
Oh, you mentioned in our last segment the Fargo Force, how you thought they were even better than the Des Moines Buccaneers. Right now they're playing like one of the best teams in the Western Conference. They've won 5 straight. They won both over the weekend. One of those victories was over Des Moines, and then they went into Lincoln the next day, and they beat the Lincoln Stars 5-3. Fargo has played the fewest games in the league. They've only played 15 games right now, so they're still not really battle-tested. But in the last 5, really in the month of November, where they've won 6 of 8, they're starting to show that they might be a team that you really have to watch out for. And last year, we were waiting for when does Fargo break out? When does Fargo break out? They never did. This year, they might be doing it in the month of November because they're 9-5-1 and within striking distance of the top spot.
Yeah, the fact that they've played the fewest number of games in the USHL tells me that they've got a lot of 3-game weekends coming up, and those are always tough. So, I mean, that might be the thing that that kind of sets them off a little bit or prevents them from really going on a tremendous run, because it's really tough to win 3-game weekends. But again, I think that the style they play, it's a real tight lockdown defensive team. And they find enough offense to win. Great goaltending as well. So I think that's a team. I do think they're going to be a top 3 team in the West, and right there with Waterloo for sure. And it's going to be a tough challenge for the Fighting Saints on Friday night.
Looking at the Western Conference that you just mentioned, Waterloo still maintains that top spot. They beat Cedar Rapids at home on Saturday 4-2, so they split the weekend. 25 points, they're 12-4-1, another fantastic start for the Waterloo Blackhawks. Then Des Moines and Fargo are the next 2 teams. Des Moines has 21 points, 2 ahead of Fargo, but Fargo with 3 games in hand. They have games in hand on just about everyone in the USHL other than the Dubuque Fighting Saints, who have also played 15 games. Tri-City right at 500, Lincoln now 8-7-1-1, Sioux City and Omaha identical 7-7-3 records, and then Sioux Falls really the only team that doesn't have a chance to make any type of big move in the next month or so because they're 9 points back of the 7th place team in Omaha. But other than Sioux Falls, that Western Conference, it seems like it could shake out just about any way from, I would say, 2 to 7, because even though there's only 4 points separating Des Moines and Waterloo, the Blackhawks feel like they're going to maintain that number 1 spot for the entire year.
I agree with that. I just look at, I think they're a more complete team than Des Moines. You know, Des Moines can score, but they also give up a lot of goals. And I don't know that getting involved in track meets is really the best recipe for, sustained success in the USHL. And I do think Waterloo is a little bit better set up for long success.
Now in the Eastern Conference, Chicago, 29 points, 14-3-1 through 18 games this season. They have already scored 90 goals, which is an absurd amount of goals to score through your first 18 games. Dubuque with that .833 win percentage. They have 25 points, but they're 12-2-1, so they still have the win percentage on Chicago. And with 3 games in hand and 4 points back, they could be able to close that gap and even overtake Chicago. And all the way down till number 6 in the Eastern Conference, you have teams over 20 points. 22 points, Team USA in 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Identical point totals, 21 points for Cedar Rapids, Green Bay, Youngstown, and then Muskegon in 7th with 17 points. Once again, just like the Western Conference, the only team right now that's not going to be able to make much of a move is Madison. They're all the way down in last with just 5 points in 18 games so far this season. But right now, flip a coin between who you think is going to finish in 3rd, who you think is going to finish in 7th. Again, I think Chicago and Dubuque, much like Waterloo, are the only 2 that really will likely maintain the 1 and 2 spots all year.
Yeah, as of right now, obviously there's only 3 elite teams in the USHL right now. That's Chicago, Dubuque, and Waterloo. But after that, it's wide open. You can see any of these teams going on a run and making some noise. So I do think you're right, though. I think those 3 teams are going to stay up where they're at or near the top. And but yeah, it's wide open, and that's really what we've come to expect. And I think we've come to expect too that maybe you have 1 or 2 really teams that struggle a lot. It seems like every year you have 3 or 4 teams that are really good, 2 or 3 teams that really struggle, and the rest are really right there in that middle and have a chance to go on a run and do something special. So what we've come to expect from the USHL, and that's what you get when you have tough games every night.
Other than, again, we're both in agreement with Chicago and Dubuque at the top, but in the next 4 teams or 5 teams, when you look at USA, Cedar Rapids, Green Bay, Youngstown, and Muskegon, have you seen anything from one of those teams that would indicate that they're going to be that 3rd place team in about a month or 2 months' time?
Team USA, the 17s have played well, and they've gotten a lot of wins here, and with that program, that's always the telling factor, because they play the majority of the games, more than half of the games. I think 60% of the games they play. So if the 17s can win and have success, You know the 18s are always going to be good. But if the 17s can have success, they have a chance to make a nice run. So I would not be surprised to see Team USA in that third spot.
Yeah, I'm with you. Muskegon's an enigma. I have no idea what that team is still. Green Bay I want to see in person again in the regular season, like you said, because they're 9-6-1. It's not a bad record, but having never seen them, I don't really know what they possess. Youngstown, to me, is the one of those 5 that we just mentioned that I think is going to finish closer to the bottom than the top because they've allowed 70 goals already this season. They've scored 61, but eventually the goal scoring is going to slow down. What I don't think slows down for Youngstown is their propensity for letting in a bunch of goals. Yeah. So eventually I think Youngstown, they're already in 6th, but that point gap between 6 and 3 is going to widen. Cedar Rapids, again, give up a lot. They score a lot, though. I think without seeing Green Bay and having no idea what I would lean Muskegon just because I think they have a really good system, good talent, and good coaching there. But right now it seems like Team USA, they're in 3rd, and I would agree with you, at least in the next month or 2, that they maintain that 3rd spot because of the 17s. But yeah, Youngstown is the only one of those for me that really, I think Youngstown becomes the one that misses the playoffs out of that group of 5.
Just haven't seen any consistency out of a lot of teams. Really, the really consistent teams are Waterloo, Chicago, and Dubuque. The rest of them have been, win a couple, lose a couple, win a couple, lose a couple. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big. I think Team USA has been one of those teams that's had a little bit more consistency than those others. So that's why I kind of have those in the Team USA in that 3rd spot.
The stats would back it up. If you look at the past 10 on the USHL website, there are only 3 teams that have won 7 or more in their past 10. That is Chicago, who is 9-1 in their last 10, Dubuque, who is 7-2-1 in their last 10, and Team USA, who is 8-2 in their last 10. So top heavy in the Eastern Conference, and the Western Conference a little bit more balanced. And we'll see how things shake out here. Most teams anywhere from 6 to 8 games between now and the Christmas break, and I'm sure we'll be doing another USHL Power Rankings here before that break, so it'll be interesting to see how much has changed in the middle, because I don't think the top are changing. Maybe a little bit of tweaking. The Fighting Saints might have played well enough to get us to put them in the top spot. I know we were hesitant the last time, but we'll see what happens in these next couple weeks before that power ranking comes out. It is Thanksgiving season, Thanksgiving on Thursday, obviously, and we're going to do a little bit of what teams should be thankful for at this time of the year, looking at 5 teams each in the USHL. Welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski, Jim Leitner, and hold on to those Christmas decorations and the Christmas songs, because there is one holiday before now and the Christmas season. A lot of people forget about it, but Thanksgiving is coming up in just a couple days. A lot to be thankful for if you're a Fighting Saints fan. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at other teams in the USAHL as well. Dubuque is one of them, and what we're going to do is just talk about what these teams can or should be thankful for at this point in the season. And it doesn't have to just be the top teams in the league. There's still a lot of season to go, so for plenty of these teams, they're not out of it yet. And what we're going to do is just bounce back and forth, name the team and what they should be thankful for right now, and kick off the Thanksgiving season. And then on Friday, Christmas lights, decorations can go up, and we can forget about the holiday that is Thanksgiving.
Wait a minute. My wife had Christmas decorations up before Halloween. That can't be right.
No, I feel like people do decorate for Halloween. I've never heard of going Christmas before Halloween. I feel like people decorate for Halloween, and then it's, you can't decorate much for Thanksgiving, but you got to at least give it its time.
Yep, Christmas music, Hallmark movies, all that before Halloween.
See, I'd be Scrooge on Christmas if I had all that stuff starting early, because I'd be sick of hearing jingle bells and Deck the Halls and all those. I'd be watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer for the 15th time by December 1st. Yeah, I wouldn't be too happy on the holiday seasons if I overloaded.
I'm down in the man cave watching football and hockey, so I guess I'm
still doing that for Christmas season too, and nothing changes. My Christmas movie is the Rangers on the holiday break. That's all I'm watching. Maybe 1 or 2 Christmas classics, but mostly sports still. But why don't you kick it off, Jim? We'll go with your first team and what they have to be thankful for.
I'm going to start with the Fighting Saints here locally. The thing that I'm thankful for is the fact that the Fighting Saints stood pat at the trading deadline last year. Because I know there were some people who thought, hey, let's go out and get a scorer, or let's go out and make a couple moves and make a big playoff run. And the Saints didn't do that. And they kept their high-end draft picks, which allowed them to get an Eric Portillo real high in the first round. And I think just by standing pat, and maintaining that same philosophy that they've always had, they don't want to sell the farm for next year. Even though I think there were some people here, some fans here, that really hoped that they would do that. They didn't do that, and I think they're really reaping the benefits right now. Because they didn't make those big moves or big splashes at the deadline last year.
A lot of returners, a lot of good draft picks. Portillo, Copperroot, another one who's just paid off in spades. I'm going to go with an Iowa team as well to kick things off. Waterloo, the top team in the Western Conference. And they have to be thankful for the fact that they can basically just flip a coin with their netminder every single night. They've split it evenly down the middle, and other than that lapse against Dubuque, Gabriel Carriere has been really just as good as Logan Stein. Stein has the best goals against and save percentage in the league. He's 6-3. Carriere is 6-1-1. And again, if you take away that Dubuque game, his save percentage is well over 90%. His goals against is in the low twos. Right now, they might have a tough decision when it comes to playoffs as who's the go-to guy. I still think it's Stein, but when you can spell him with a backup that's as good as most team starters, it's a pretty good sign for Waterloo.
Well, whoever you go with, if you go with a hot hand in the playoffs, you know that they're going to be rested. They're not going to be overworked because of playing 40 games in the regular season. So I think that's a really good one. I do like their goaltending situation, and if you get an injury, if something happens, or a guy gets called up to a national team, you have a very capable backup in hand too. So that's a good call. My second one, I'm going to go with Chicago, and just they should be thankful for all the high-end scoring they have.
No kidding.
They have 5 guys in the top 8 in the USHL in scoring. Sean Farrell leads the league. Mateo De Saint-Fall is second. Sam Colangio is actually tied with De Saint-Fall. Brendan Brisson and Gunnar Wolf Fontaine, 5 guys in the top 8. And that's why they're running away with the goal-scoring lead right now, why they're scoring so many goals. They have so much good high-end talent.
Yeah, no, it's early. No one's catching them. I mean, 90 goals already, and they're not going to score 18 a weekend like they did this last weekend, but they're going to score a lot every single weekend. It'd be interesting to see later in the season defensively if they can figure it out defensively. They're going to be really, really dangerous this season. I'm going to go with another high-scoring team here in the Lincoln Stars, and they can be thankful for the fact that it just can't be worse than last year at this point in the season. I mean, Lincoln's on a little bit of a tough patch. They're 0-3 in their last 3. They're 3-5-1-1 in their last 10. But they still only need 4 more wins to match their win total all of last season. They're 8-7-1-1. They've put together a great offensive season so far under third-year head coach Cody Chupp, and now it's just can they figure out the defensive side of things. But again, it can't be worse than last year for Lincoln, and they've already put together a good start to the season. So now it's just building off of it and forgetting about the past, 6 to 7 games.
Yeah, no doubt about it. My next one, I'm going to go with the Fargo Force, who the Fighting Saints are going to see this weekend. I think they should be thankful for patience. That's a team that they got a little bit of a slow start out of the gates, and they stayed patient. They stayed the course. Now they've won the last 5 in a row to get them to 9-5-1, and I think they're one of the elite teams in the Western Conference. So it's just a matter of staying patient, staying the course, and things would work out. And here they are, and they're going to be one of the tough teams to beat in the West.
Next up for me, I have Team USA. There's a lot of talk right now about the younger generation, millennials ruining this country. Well, Team USA can be thankful for the younger generation because the U17s are pulling their weight this season. They've won, I think, 3 of their last 4 of their last 5. They beat the Fighting Saints. They won 2 against Sioux City. And you talked about it. That's when you know Team USA is going to be good, is when the U17s are playing really, really well, because last year it was the U18s, they were world beaters, and the U17s, who are now the U18s this year, they weren't bad, but they weren't great. This year's U17 crop is very, very good, and they have the potential to, I think, not just make it to the playoffs, but win a round, maybe even 2 in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and I think the 17s, if I'm not mistaken, last year they really struggled out of the gate. And I think it took them a while to get that first win. I think it was into November when they got their first win last year, if I'm not mistaken. But so if the 17s can play 500 hockey or better the first couple of months of the season, that sets them up for long-term success, and I think they've been better than that.
Yeah.
My next one is I'm going to go with the Youngstown Phantoms. They're 3 games above 500 despite a -9 goal differential. It's a team, if they ever figure things out defensively, I think they have a really good chance of making a big climb in the Eastern Conference standings. But to be 3 games above 500 despite being -9, I think that's a good sign, they should be thankful for that.
Yeah.
Not a good sign, but I think they should be thankful for that. And like I said, if they turn things around, I think they got a shot.
Next up, I've got the Muskegon Lumberjacks, and they can be thankful for the fact that Daniil Gushchin still really hasn't figured things out the way many expected him to this year. I mean, he's not having a bad season by any means. He has 16 points in 15 games. He has 2 in the last 6. He had 0 in the first 4. That means 14 of his 16 points have come in a 5-game stretch, and that was towards the middle of the season. If he figures it out consistently, he's the best player in the USHL. I don't care what the numbers Chicago's players are putting up. There's a lot of talent in this league, but Gushchin is the most talented forward if he figures things out consistently, and Muskegon can be thankful for that. There's still a long way in this season for him to do that, because if he does, he can single-handedly carry that team to a top 3 position in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I just kind of hope that he waits a couple weeks before he figures it out.
Maybe until after the holidays.
Maybe after the first weekend in December. My last one is I'm going to go with the Sioux Falls Stampede. Now, you could say they're 3-11-2. What can they be thankful for? I think they should be thankful that they won the Clark Cup last year.
Yeah.
Because that gives you a feel-good feeling, and it kind of takes a little bit of the sting off of a 3-11-2 start. It's a team that just has obviously struggled out of the gates, but anytime you win a Clark Cup, you still have that warm and fuzzy feeling for maybe a couple years afterwards, and like I said, it takes the sting out of that poor start.
What's interesting about this league is the only people that might not be feeling that warm and fuzzy feeling are the actual players, because most of them weren't on that Clark Cup team. But the fan base, the coaching staff, you're absolutely right. It definitely takes the sting off of a poor start like this. My final one is Omaha, and the old saying, there's no place like home for the holidays. That's what Omaha has to be thankful for, is that they're home 5 of their next 6 games. I mentioned that I think they're going to be one of the top 3 in the Western Conference at the end of the season, but they have to figure it out on the road if that's the case. They're 2-5-2 away from home. They're 5-2-1 at home, and again, 5 of their next 6 at home. This is their chance before the holiday season, before that break, where Omaha can make a big push to get into the top 3 at the Western Conference, because they play so much better at home, and that's where they're going to be here more often than not to end this first half of the season. So a couple teams we didn't get to, but for sure there are, every team can be thankful for something at this point in the season. And hopefully if you're the Fighting Saints on Thanksgiving, you're already celebrating a win in Des Moines, and you're looking forward to 2 more against Fargo and Sioux Falls. A lot of travel, a tough weekend, and we'll see what the Fighting Saints can do with 3 in 4. That's all the time we have for this edition of the Fighting Saints Report. Make sure to look on social media and also online for updates on these next couple home games. 6th and 7th against Muskegon, and the 7th is Teddy Bear Toss, and then the 14th to close things out before the holiday break against the Green Bay Gamblers. 3 of the next 4 after this weekend at home, so get your tickets before the holiday break. And for Jim Leitner, I'm Jack Milewski, signing off.